All right. All right. So we are live now.
Fantastic.
So everything that we say is going to be recorded and it's going to be on YouTube forever.
Thanks for that heads up.
So, yeah. So while we're waiting for a few people to jump onto the live stream, how's everyone doing with the sequestered status that we're all in these days?
I'm with Pravin. I'm someone who's used to working from home and working from pretty much anywhere. So I'm okay, coping with the new normal. And hopefully it's not for too long. Fingers crossed. I do like to get out.
Yeah, I think as long as you're in a somewhat isolated part of town or it's not too crowded, I think it's kind of okay, right, to get out.
That is true.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Dani?
Good.
Yeah, remote work is a big part of our culture at Invibed. So luckily we were very kind of prepared and set up for it. We didn't have to do a whole lot to adjust on our end. But, I do miss having the option to go into the office and, get out of the house a little bit, definitely.
Yeah, nice. Pravin, you're also working from home, so I guess you're kind of used to it just like I am, huh?
Oh no, that's fair. Normally I don't work at home, but I'm an introvert, so I naturally
well, yeah, I get to stay home.
Being. Yeah. Also, I spend a lot of my day writing software, and it's really great to kind of have like this consistent, uninterrupted time to think deeply about what you're working on. And so I have enjoyed that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I see you have the shades up and the lights on, which isn't necessarily what most programmers like to do, but thank you for doing that for this video. So we've got a couple of people tuned in already. I think we can start. Dharti, do you want to give us a little introduction on TiE New York and yourself, please?
Happy to do that. So I'm Dharti Desai, President of TiE New York, also Vice Chair for TiE Women, which is a TiE global initiative. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I know there are trying times, and everyone's coping in whatever way works for them. I want to say a special thank you to Pankaj for helping us put this together virtually for TiE New York. So TiE, I know that there's going to be, we're going to have a mixed bag. We're going to have members, charter members, board members, of course, and some non-members, so people who are first-timers for TiE overall. I'd just like to spend a couple of seconds talking about TiE. It's a global organization, not-for-profit, for entrepreneurs, by entrepreneurs, and we are 61 chapters globally. This is the New York chapter that I'm a president of. We have a fantastic board here. We have cadence programming that brings in entrepreneurs of all stages. So we have early stage, concept, late stage. We get together for different programs every month, which I'll be happy to talk about a little bit more about as well. The idea is between the associate members who are the early stage or the beginning level entrepreneurs come in contact with charter members who are the veterans, the more seasoned entrepreneurs who are in a space to give back. And so there's a really nice exchange that happens between mentor, mentee as a result of this. And we also have some student members. We have a lot of different programs globally, like TiE Women, TiE Young Entrepreneurs, etc. For New York, we have a Tuesday programming that's set in place. First Tuesday of the month, we have our charter member networking, where we invite charter members to come and exchange ideas and talk about their businesses, if there are any challenges, or any value sharing that they'd like to do. Second Tuesday of the month is something called Open Mic Night, which is an invitation for startups of any stage to come and pitch their idea for 2 minutes, where they get feedback from the audience, which usually consists of charter members. It could be they're looking for co-founders, they're looking for a team, they're looking for access to funding. So that's Open Mic Night. And the third Tuesday, we have our mentorship and education event. which basically is, so we have a cadenced programming. So that's really coming from Open Mic Night, ideally startups who require mentoring. So we either do flash mentoring or we do a mentor-mentee connect from our charter member base. And then we also have 2 pitch competitions every year where a lot of the startups do come from our programming, but it's open to everybody, where entrepreneurs come in and apply. And then there's a pitch competition with judges from outside the community, where we have winners for different things. But the big purpose there is to get access to funding from our charter member base. And we also have an angel program for TIE New York. We have chairs for all of these committees, and we've revamped, as Pankaj and I were talking about earlier. So we've given a facelift to TIE New York, and we've got a fantastic set of charter members and board members. But please, when you have some time, for the new folks, go to ny.tie, that's TIE. .org, so ny.tie.org, and we look forward to seeing some of you join us in the future. Pankaj, I'm going to let you take it from here so we can focus on our event. Once again, thank you so much, Pankaj, for doing this, for putting this together. We're all very thrilled to be here, and I know it's unusual circumstances, but
thank you. Thanks for the support and kind of helping us get this off the ground.
Thank you.
All right, so welcome to our first TIE New York FinTech panel. This is an online panel, so hopefully we've got some folks internationally who are joining in, even though it might be a little late in some of those regions. Dani, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and Invibed and kind of what you guys are doing, and we'll go from there. Dani, I think you're muted.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pankaj, and thanks for the great introduction, and thanks to
Sure.
everybody who's joining today. I'm as you mentioned, I'm Dani Pascarella. I am the founder and CEO of Invibed, and we are a financial behavior change platform that helps people develop healthy money habits. And my background is I, was always very into finance, became a licensed stockbroker when I was 20 years old, worked through college, went on to Wall Street, where I was working at, JP Morgan in their private bank. And while I was there, really realized that financial literacy was a very big problem. I was managing money for some of the wealthiest people in the world, while concurrently, my friends who were all, they had great jobs, they were, people who did really well in school, but when it came to managing money, they were really, really struggling. So that's kind of the origin of where we got started, and where I started to think like, this is a bit of a problem. Flash forward a few years, and now we have this whole platform, and we have thousands of users who have used Invibed to really develop healthy financial habits. And on average, our typical user will increase their net worth by $9,000 in their first year working with us.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. We're going to get into a whole bunch of stuff about what you guys are doing afterwards. But first, Pravin, I'd love for you to make an introduction. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you guys are doing at FreeMarkets.
Excellent. So at FreeMarkets.ai, our basic mission is right now, 1% of all global wealth is deployed with data and algorithms. And what we're trying to do is bring the benefits of investing using large scale data, using the cutting edge of machine learning, and using a lot of financial fundamental common sense, and integrate these so that asset managers can improve their performance using these tools. And as far as the mission goes, I think we might be a little bit late for this crisis, but the last financial crisis, global wealth declined 36%. And we are trying to build the infrastructure for a financial system where in the future, individual wealth is more robust against the caprices of market in an increasingly connected world.
So, Pravin, can you tell me or tell us a little bit about what prompted you to quit your job and start doing this? And when was that?
So this was in 2016, and I was at Balyasny Asset Management, and it was an incredible firm. Everyone was incredibly kind. It's one of the best cultures I've seen in finance, and developed some incredibly close friendships during that time. But I think there were two realizations that struck me. And the first was, and this was, I was hand entering numbers into Excel, into a spreadsheet. And I was grabbing dinner with my brother, who works with me, who was working at Google at the time. And he had just been part of a team that had 10x Google's travel revenue by combining all of Google's data with machine learning. And I realized that the fundamental game of investing was about to be transformed, and that the impact of machine learning, large data sets, and financial analysis was going to leave investing and change investing in quite fundamental ways. And I realized there was a second opportunity, which is, as this transformation happened, to make it so that more people could benefit from those insights and from the power of increased computation. And I think this has been one of the questions: is, does technology concentrate wealth more and more, or does it create the opportunity for new infrastructure that allows society as a whole to benefit?
So, since you guys have started, it's been a couple of years now, right? Since you guys have been building the platform out. And, do you think that the market that you're targeting, and for our viewers who are just joining in, who specifically is your target customer? If you can define that, and then explain how receptive are folks, especially in the wealth management space, to machines making decisions about where money should be deployed, and is that gonna have a long-term effect on price compression or fee compression, I should say?
Yeah, absolutely. So our current target market is both large hedge funds, large asset managers, and large wealth managers, kind of the whole spectrum. And the reason we've started with the higher end of the market is because they tend to have the financial knowledge to be able to understand how to integrate the tools. And I bring up integrate because our belief isn't that machines are going to go and automate humans. Our belief is that by integrating what machines do really well, we can allow human wealth managers, financial managers, to actually see markets in new ways and invest in markets more effectively with those insights. And so I suppose at its core, our belief is that I think it's something like 99% of asset managers have underperformed the S&P over the last 20 years. Our belief is that that those numbers can change, and that humans with machines can outperform. Even at Google, where they have all the world's data, all the best engineers, all the best infrastructure, what they found is human judgment combined with machines outperforms any algorithm by over 20%. And I believe that that's proven true in advertising at Google. It's proven true in my former work with the military. And I really do believe that it'll prove true in finance as well.
Okay. So I think, Dani, I'd love to get into the same questions with you. Since you've started, and if you could just tell everyone who just joined recently, when you guys started, how have you approached customer acquisition since starting?
Sure. So since we got started, our customer acquisition has actually changed quite a bit. When we first started, we were actually not trying to be a startup or a big business. I mentioned before that a lot of my friends were struggling with money, and my first thought was, a lot of people have tried to solve this problem. Financial literacy is a big issue. Let me just create a website that just aggregates all of these tools. So that's what it was at first. And we had free education, and we were getting a ton of traffic from that. But then I started actually talking to users and people who are reading and having dialogue. And what we found was that education is part of the problem, and financial education is important, but that's not the reason why most people were failing. And we're seeing the effects now, with what's going on in the world today. Nearly half of Americans say, according to recent surveys that have been taken. I was just looking at one that LendingTree did, but nearly half of Americans are worried they're not going to be able to pay their rent or their mortgage this month. You have 1/4 of Americans right now who are like, I don't know if I can pay my credit card bill. And it's a fundamental problem. And if you ask most people, like, do you know you should have enough money to cover like at least a month of rent in case something bad happens? Most people would say yes. Yeah, sure. I'd love to have more money, but why don't they? And that's where it kind of, the light bulb went off for me, is that it's a behavior change problem. Education's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole thing. And that's the point where I really decided, let's build a company around this and focus on behavior change and really study that. So at first, we actually had a group of users where we were studying behavior change for like a year. Just what makes them do the right things, what makes them fall off the wagon, and really understanding that. And then from there, we started selling directly to consumers. We had really good case studies. But where things really took off for us was when we started actually working with enterprises. So now we're in businesses ranging from, top 10 public university to a Fortune 500 company to a fast-growing startup to a nationally known nonprofit. And what we found is that financial wellness affects so many people, right? It's the #1 driver of mental health issues and stress in our country, which in turn affects how people do their jobs, how productive they are, just their overall demeanor throughout the day. And at the end of it, that's why people go to work. They want to get paid so they can live the lives they want to live. And there was this disconnect. And the second disconnect we found was when we would go speak to HR departments. And the way we started working with businesses was our customers on the B2C side actually said, hey, come into my office. We have like all these benefits, 401k, match, whatever. Not one person in my office understands what any of this means. It is all like, and it's crazy to think about, but that's the truth. So what we would do is we'd go into offices and we'd actually survey all of the employees and ask, what do you care about? What financially, like, what are you the most stressed about? And when we survey audiences, less than 10% say retirement. But if you look at where companies and all the focus is, it's on investing, it's on saving for retirement. That's where most of the, the allocation in terms of budget goes for financial benefits. So what we found was there's this major disconnect. Employees were struggling with meeting their day-to-day needs and saving for retirement when you don't know if you can make rent this month. It's like preparing for the SATs when you're in 3rd grade. Like, it's a little early. So that's when we really started working with enterprises, and that's kind of the path going forward. Just because it solves the problem for the individual and then also the organization that we're working with.
So now, in terms of the educational challenge that you're facing, right? Working with enterprises, going into those enterprises and working with their employees, how's the business model evolved since you first kind of started out, right? Because you started out with one very different model. Today, you're going to enterprises and working with their employees. How's the business model evolved? And what challenges has that created for you as you've evolved the business model and evolved who your actual customer that you're focusing on is?
Yeah, great question. So the business model the end product has not evolved too much, just because like behavior change for an individual is behavior change. What we've really spent the last year honing in on is how do you make enterprises happy? And that's a challenge that I think a lot of startups face, is when the end user is not the person paying the bill. Now you kind of have two people to keep really happy, and both parties care about, very different things a lot of times. The way we tackle that issue is we just created an innovation partner program. So we said, who are the kinds of enterprises that we would like to work with, that we think we can help them achieve their goals? And let's find like a really great anchor client in each of those areas. So that's why we have universities, we have smaller businesses, we have larger enterprises that are part of the Fortune 500. So from there, that innovation partnership and that structure allowed us to, part of the way we structured those deals is, hey, you've got to give us a lot of feedback, and like, let's test this out. And like, really, this is a learning experience for both of us. You get a great price on it. And like, we'll make tweaks to the product to make sure that you're happy. So we're very attentive, but in turn, you're going to give us that feedback. And that's been key in helping us change our model. And everything's changed from, pricing to, and like how we look at that, to how we engage with people. On the B2C side, you get people who are very motivated and they're paying out of pocket. On the enterprise side, you kind of have to make people care much more so than before. So that's certainly changed. I think going back to your question on acquisition, though, that's something else we've learned also. I think learning is kind of underrated. Like learning about your customer, it's in some ways it's underrated a bit. I think a lot of times like our initial instinct was like, let's go out and sell. But the thing that's been so helpful to us is like the more time you can spend with your customer and the more close you can get, where you can just straight up ask them like, why would you buy this? Why would somebody else buy this? That's like the number one thing that's helped with our sales process. And that's how we've optimized our sales funnel a lot. It was just feedback from customers that we're already working with.
Gotcha. Pravin, on your end, your business continues to evolve. I mean, both of you are fairly young startups. And in some of the conversations that we've had before, you talked about how, you have a certain client that you're going after today, and over time you expect that client to become not necessarily a smaller base of customer, but you plan on going after a very different type of customer, right? So tell me a little bit about the challenges that you're seeing in terms of bridging that, right? Like you have two different customer bases that you want to target, and it's going to evolve over time. But what kind of challenges do you see from where you are today and getting to where you want to be in 2 years from now, right? How are you dealing with some of those challenges also?
Absolutely. And I just want to echo everything Dani's saying, which is the most important thing we found is to listen. So what we've been looking at is we have a few large hedge fund clients. And as we try to expand into the wealth market, there's an entirely different set of requirements to support a wealth manager than to support a hedge fund. So and it's in a sense an entirely different product. And we've been chatting with these large wealth managers, these large asset managers, to figure out exactly what they want. So for example, if I'm a hedge fund, I have my own process, and a quantitative system may serve as idea generation. It may serve as diligence. It may serve as an input among many. If I'm a wealth manager, the thing that's really compelling is traditionally I've been limited to buying, the S&P 500 or a set of indices or ETFs. But the thing that they find more compelling is the idea that I can construct a systematic ETF using data, and then test and then deploy that at the click of a button. And so building out that flow and building it out so it fits exactly into their process, exactly into their schema for building portfolios and building indices is the challenge there. And it's actually really exciting because we're learning so much from them, and I think it improves our view of markets. And we've had some really interesting conversations back and forth on how we can use these products to allow their customers and their clients to be protected against market caprices in ways that I think were previously not really possible or not really achievable for them.
Okay, fine. But what do you think that you need as a business today? What do you think you need to bridge that gap between the hedge funds that you're servicing today and the wealth managers that you want to target, right? Like, as an organization, what are the pieces that you think you need to put in place? And what are the resources that you need to actually put those things in place?
I'd say the biggest thing is that a wealth manager wants an entire end-to-end flow. So, I build an index, I have a series of indices, and I can just deploy them against markets, and then I can monitor them. And we've largely built out the infrastructure on that, but it's really a product process of building out the series of screens that tie into their flows effectively. And we're currently in the middle of that iteration process. The second element that we're looking to do is incorporate the full set of assets, fixed income indices, munis, international equities, so that, traditionally international indices can be kind of a hairy place to be because you'll own something and you won't know what it is. Similar with fixed income indices. And so being able to actually custom build these indices so you know what you own, you know why you own it, is the value add for them. And we do use, data, algorithms, large scale compute, but at its core, almost everything we do is not a black box. They can audit everything down to the level of the company model and then tie every single investment decision to like solid fundamental investment logic. This is a business that has profit, that has growth, that is cheap based on this view of its future. And I can look at that future and I can audit it and have a glimpse of it.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Okay. Probably something that we should have brought up earlier in the stream, but now we have more people joining us, so I thought now is a good time to bring this up. What does the evolution of FinTech mean for you guys? I can talk about what it means to me, but I'd rather hear from you both and put it into the context of your businesses and the opportunities that changing definition, at least in your minds and your personal view of what that definition is, what that's allowed for you to mean in terms of opportunities in your business, and how that's presenting new opportunities as your business continues to evolve. And if you see the definition evolving, how is that creating new opportunities and new challenges for you going forward? So kind of at a higher level, just so that some of our viewers who may or may not know too much about your individual businesses could kind of extrapolate that into what that might mean for them if they are new FinTech startups or thinking about starting something soon. So Dani, would love to start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, the way I think about FinTech is it's really like anything that improves the delivery or like the use of financial services. And that definition hasn't changed too much for me. But I think what that means, and I look at everything through the lens of our end user or, our consumers, I think it means that for somebody who is on top of finance from a personal standpoint, it's FinTech, the expansion of FinTech is amazing. If you look back even 10 years ago, like most of the consumer FinTech products that people use did not exist. It was like mint.com, maybe a handful of other things, and that's it. Now there's just been this explosion of options across, everything from, lending to budgeting, like any investments. There are so many options. To the typical American, where we live in a country that frankly is failing at financial literacy. Most schools don't teach this stuff. It's very confusing, and the amount of choices that people have is getting more and more overwhelming. What that means for our business is like there's a very big opportunity for whoever can come in and just make this really easy to digest and understand. Because when you look at something like FinTech from the consumer side, choice is great, but too much choice, people shut down, they'll get overwhelmed. And it's something that like finance and just managing your own money, it's so easy to just avoid it and not deal with it because it's already a very stressful, emotionally charged thing for people. So for us, the opportunity there is, how can we make this easier on people? How can we make the insane amounts of choices and information out there be digestible and applicable to each individual in the quickest way possible?
Okay, cool. Pravin, you want to talk about what FinTech means to you and what does it mean to your business going forward in terms of opportunities and challenges?
I'd say at its core, technology is a tool, and finance is the energy of our global system, of our civilization, of our society. And I think at its core, FinTech is the potential to use tools to empower people to be the masters of their own destiny. What we've seen over the last 20 years, I think, in technology is this shift where information is more and more available, more and more democratized. Compute is more and more available and more democratized. And what's exciting about finance is just how deep it is and how much nitty-gritty in the weeds work it takes to provide something of value. And if you can take that and build kind of a robust system to allow people to be able to manage their capital, manage their wealth, and make sure that we as a society are able to manage our capital and manage our wealth, I think that's the real potential of FinTech. And our focus has been building deep technology that can empower the major actors of the financial system to do that.
Okay. So, I think both of you have touched on some interesting points in terms of where you think FinTech is going. I think, Pravin, yours seems to be more around computation and compute power and combining that with some human intelligence. And Dani, for you, I think, and please do correct me if I'm misstating what you said. I think for you, it's, FinTech is more about education, and it's more about expanding the accessibility of that education, but using technology as a means to do that. Partly because we are failing as, and I don't think it's just in the US, I think it's kind of all over the world. People don't want to talk about money. People don't know how to talk about money. And people aren't talking about money. I think, there are some cultures where children are taught about money from a very young age. And part of that is just circumstance, and they're forced to. But in other cases, it's more of just the way the cultures are, where people are a little bit more free to talk to their children about what money is, what money means, and why is it important, etc. So I think from my view, I think the definition of FinTech has changed drastically over the last 20 years. I think 20 years ago, people, when they no one was talking about FinTech, but when they talked about financial services technology, they pretty much alluded to Wall Street in some way, shape, or form, right? Whether it was banking combined with capital markets, but it was something around capital markets. And that's where most technology was being developed, and where it was being innovated on, and a lot of money was being spent on it. And I think over the last 10 years, we've seen that change a lot, with the peer-to-peer lending, online lending platforms. We've seen more and more educational platforms popping up, and now with neobanks and a lot of different things. So I think we've gone from really corporate and enterprise-related things to things that are in some ways decentralized. Of course, the whole cryptocurrency and Bitcoin phenomena over the last 10 years, we should also tip our hats to when it comes to FinTech, because those are financial technology products that have changed the way people think about finance and money. But I think the interesting part to me about where FinTech is going today is, in some ways, companies that wouldn't have been thought about as financial technology companies 5 or 6 years ago are today falling into that bucket, right? Companies that are looking at due diligence, companies that are looking at resource management, and anything that is somehow touching the capital structure of a business is kind of falling into that space. So I think that's the exciting thing that I see in FinTech, is just the whole space is opening up extremely wide, and people are innovating in places where there probably hasn't been any innovation ever, right? Like for managing your accounts and everything at a small business, QuickBooks was probably the biggest innovation in the last 20 years. But now you have so much more happening, where even small businesses have more tools and options available to manage, right? Like, it's not the direction that you're going in today, Pravin, but why can we say in 10 years or 5 years from now that a small business can do their treasury management using the free markets platform, right? Like if you have data sets that are freely available, and you kind of open that up and say, hey, you can be a small business and manage your cash in short-term investments right through free markets, right? That to me is kind of the brilliant aspect of what you guys are doing today and kind of like blazing that path on. So enough I'll get off the soapbox now. And Dani, you are, you have like two customers, as you mentioned before, right? You're targeting the businesses and you're targeting the employees that work at businesses, and you're tackling a problem that is it's very difficult to solve, right? And that's the behavioral problem. It's not, less about the education, more about changing people's behaviors. You can teach somebody something, but unless you can force them to change the way they behave, that education isn't necessarily going to mean much to them, right? So now, in terms of some of the larger organizations that you've been working with, can you talk a little bit about success rates that you've seen and how you measure success? Not in terms of your business. I would assume that if an individual is successful by the metrics that you've established, that when you aggregate it all up, your business will be successful as well. But specifically on an individual level, what are some of the metrics that you've laid out for defining what success means for some of the people that you've been working with?
Yeah, so great question. So when we work with an individual, there are a couple metrics that we look at across the board. One of the we're always tracking the net worth of all of our users in real time, which in the world of financial education, that's kind of unheard of. It's usually, here's an e-course, have a nice day. So we're coupling, educational video lessons. We have an accountability coach and all of those aspects, but it's also, we're tracking net worth in real time to make sure you're improving.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
So when you say that you're tracking your customers' net worth in real time, is that by plugging into their bank accounts, their brokerage accounts, their credit card accounts, their direct deposit, et cetera, or exactly how are you tracking that?
Yeah, so we're connected to all of their bank accounts. So if we have a client who's trying to spend less money on, shopping sprees, and they go on a shopping spree at lunch, like their coach can see that and send them a text message. That's how granular we get. So again, like high level metrics, we'll look at debt reduction, we'll look at building an emergency fund, and if that balance is going up. So we have a crazy amount of data that we'll use, and we will report to like large enterprises. We'll show in aggregate or in cohort groups. It's never like John did this and spent this much money and has this much more credit card debt. We don't tell individual stats, but we'll report them in aggregate across those things that matter to everyone. So are your employees building their emergency funds so that, if this does become a recession or layoffs do happen, are they better suited to deal with that? Is debt going down? These are the kinds of things we'll report at a high level. But then on the individual level, we look at something different, and we look at individual goals. So like within our platform, the first thing we have our customers do, our users, is complete their goals. So what's the reason you're doing this? What's driving you to better yourself in this area? Is it you're trying to reduce stress? Is it that you're saving for an engagement ring, or you want to start a family? Like, what are the things you're looking to do? And then from there, they actually will go on a track that helps them get closer to that goal. So we're not only tracking whether they achieve that goal or not, but we're tracking every step of the way the actions they're taking. So are they completing financial tasks that get them closer to that goal? If the idea is they want to have an emergency fund, all right, here's where you can open your account. Did you do it? Then we're setting up automatic transfers to make sure that, like, from each paycheck on payday, that account is getting funded and that emergency balance is going up. And we'll track like at the individual level. That's what they're seeing is in relation to their specific goals and how they are doing relative to what they care about the most.
So are you sitting with them and defining these goals up front? And who are some of the coaches, right? Like, bringing people on as coaches, is this kind of like the gig economy also, where you have people that will come in and out as financial coaches? What are the requirements for them to be a coach? Do they need to be a CFA or CFP, an accountant? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so for the coaches, great question there as well. There's two levels of coaches that we work with. The first is like your your point person. We call them your wealth coach. That's your person that you go to for accountability. I'm a CFP. We're great. Lots of deep knowledge there, but we found that there's not really a training program that equips you to deal with the 78% of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck. That's a very different set of problems than, a CFA or a CFP is dealing with when they're managing assets for the wealthy. And that's the thing that's crazy, is that 4 out of 5 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Their concern, investing is cool, it's great, we'll get to that, but let's solve the issue now that's stressing you out the most, which is the paycheck to paycheck cycle. The person for that is more like it's a certain kind of profile that we look for. Typically, they have a experience working in finance, but it's more like that coach mindset or that coach mentality. They're the person that I like to think of them as. I like that person if you're in a fitness class that really motivates you to or a personal trainer that motivates you to run faster, do the exercises with more, with more emphasis on it and all of that. So that's the level 1. Level 2 is like a specialist. So I talked a little bit about those areas of focus. So for example, if you're trying to buy a home, you would talk to a home buying specialist who has deep expertise in that area. If you're trying to refinance debt, different specialists. So we have kind of 2 levels there. And again, gig economy is fantastic for this. So most of our coaches.
Whoa, looks like we lost Dani there. All right, well, Pravin, let's jump into the next question with you. Okay, Dani's back. Yeah, sorry, we lost you there.
Apologies. So where did we get cut off? Happy to.
I don't know exactly where.
You were discussing how different needs require different coaches, and how you have different coaches calibrated for each of the needs of your consumers.
Okay, thanks, Pravin. So you have your day-to-day coach that helps you with staying accountable, being motivated, and then you also have specialists. So if we do need the deep financial expertise, that CFP or that, say you're trying to buy a home or do something big, we'll bring in the expert for that. But day-to-day, you need a motivator. You need somebody who's gonna, help you change that behavior and achieve your goals, which is more of an expert in psychology. And we've developed all our own training around this that all of our coaches go through, but most of the training for that day-to-day, it is psychology based. It's how do you get people to stay motivated and change their behavior. And circling back to, is this a gig economy? Yeah, many of our coaches, they, some of them are they do this and this is what they do and this is their main, the main way they spend their time. But for our specialists, many of them have practices where they're focused on mortgages or they're focused on something else, and they're coming in because they see what we're doing and how it's improving lives, and this is kind of how they give back and do social good with their expertise. So we're tapping into experts that frankly we probably couldn't afford them, but because of our mission and the way we're changing lives, they're glad to be on board.
Okay, cool. I just want to interrupt for 1 second and just tell our viewers that if anyone's got a question, feel free to ask a question in the comments section. We will try to get to every single question that gets asked. So, considering everything that's going on in the world right now, I don't think any conversation is complete without a discussion about the coronavirus. And, this question is for both of you. And perhaps, Dani, maybe you can continue on this thread since you've been talking about the coaching and everything. How are your coaches and how are the customers approaching their finances and their financial situation right now, considering everything that's been going on with the stock market, the tons of uncertainty and everything else? What are people doing? Are you seeing more and more people jumping onto Invibed because they need help figuring some of this stuff out, or are you seeing people just kind of curl up into the fetal position and not know what to do? So I'm curious. And Pravin, same question for you. Your customer base is a little bit different, but I still want to touch on how is this affecting your business, and is it in a positive way? So Dani, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so for our clients who've been with us for a while, we're getting a lot of, like, I see the payoff. I have an emergency fund. I feel so much better. Thank you. So we've gotten a lot of people who are very glad they took their vitamins before, so to speak. So we've been hearing a lot of that. We have seen, though, a spike in both people who are existing clients that are concerned. So many of them work in industries that were very, very affected and are continue to be affected by coronavirus. So they're taking a lot of them are taking proactive steps in terms of, and like things like, for example, prior to this, there was a client that came up that was like, should I reduce retirement contributions now so I can put extra in my emergency fund in case this lasts longer? So we have some very smart clients who've been with us for a while that are thinking in that way and being proactive. That being said, we're getting a lot of first-time calls and first-time outreach from people who got this through their employer or their university. They weren't the initial bunch to use it and start participating, but now all of a sudden that there's a crisis at stake, they're starting to reach out and be like, what can I do? And I think that it's tip of the iceberg now. I think people are still kind of like processing and like they're worried, but they're, fetal position, like you said. I think when we see the true spike is, suddenly we're relevant again. So people that weren't thinking an emergency fund is an important thing, no one's questioning it now. Everyone now understands the importance of having an emergency fund, not having a ton of debt, and being financially solvent. So I think really for us, the spike is going to be, and then also, employers.
Oops. I think we lost Dani. Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Apologies, everyone, for that. Adjusting to this. this.
That's all right. That's all right. Everyone's Wi-Fi is going crazy at this time.
But yeah, I think we'll really see we're suddenly now a lot more relevant, and we don't have to justify that, and fight for all the things that are like maybe not as fun, like an emergency fund or living within your means. But now people kind of get it. So I'm very excited for once this blows over, talking to, all of the employers that maybe didn't buy our product and wish they did in hindsight that are now going to buy from us as soon as this is over. And then same for individuals. There are a lot of people who maybe they were on the fence and now they get it and they're ready to take action so that they never feel this stress or, the fear of, am I gonna, miss my rent or miss my mortgage ever again? It's been a long time since people have had this kind of pressure. 2008 was over 10 years ago. So now and people are very quick to forget. So I think if anything, this is a reminder of how important it is to just take care of your own finances.
And there's a lot of people who just weren't working and didn't have to think about finances in 2008, right? Like if you were 17 or 18, you probably, or even if you were 20, you probably weren't really thinking about your finances much at that time, right? And whereas today, now you're an adult and presumably working, maybe with a family, and you need to think about it. So I think you're right. That does change the dynamics considerably. Pravin, how's everything that's going on in the markets and just in general, how is that affecting, your business and how your customers are viewing things right now?
So our hedge fund customers have actually been doing very well in this environment, which makes sense because they tend to have been aware of most of these developments. For wealth managers, this is actually opening the doors a lot more quickly, and they're seeing the relevance a lot more. And just to back up, there are kind of three things happening now that are really interesting. Two of which are short term, one of which I think is very long term. That mean that the nature of investing, I'd argue, over the next 40 years will look completely different than the last 40 years. So right now we have three shocks that have simultaneously happened that have caused this economic catastrophe. The first is coronavirus, which it's incredible how conscientious everyone has been and how everyone has come together by living apart in order to prevent the spread of this. But it's really dire in terms of what that means for the economy over the next 1, 2, 3 quarters. The second is the oil shock, and that's a very strategic move by Putin to cripple the American energy sector through price cuts, and the kind of spiral that has had on the energy sector, which is largely debt fueled, and where they have to pay off their debt by pumping out more oil, which just decreases the price of oil further. And then there's a third component, which I think is very important, especially for wealth managers, which is ever since like Paul Volcker raised interest rates to 20% in 1979, you have been able to just own stocks and own bonds for 40 years. And every time something went wrong in the markets, the Fed could cut rates and the bond index would go up and the market would go up. And so we've essentially become addicted to these interest rate cuts over the last 40 years and been able to just ride. Yeah. And now interest rates are at zero. And so this old kind of formula of like, let's own stocks, let's own bonds, and let's just ride this up is done. And so what's really, I mean, it is partially terrifying, but it's also a real opportunity. And I always joke that our generation, after 9/11, with the wars, with the financial crisis, we kind of grew up in the church of unintended consequences. And there's this really important moment right now where we need to be finding the next series of robust financial categories to face uncertainty in this world and to make sure that we as a society are investing that way. And we believe we have parts of that equation. So one of the things I can say personally is the moment that we saw interest rates drop real negative, we just went straight to cash because we were like, okay, the dynamic that has shifted the market no longer applies. And now as we've been looking at new categories, there's a new series of things. And right now we're in a liquidity crisis, right? People are just selling because they have no choice but to sell. People are levered, getting margin called. And there are kind of three elements that we think are coming out of this. The first is that we want to replace leverage with smart investing. One of my friends sold his startup, invested in the market, had a wealth manager, showed me what his wealth manager had him doing, and he was 3x levered long the market. And I was just like, this is not, and he had told the wealth manager to be conservative, but he just had no idea. It's one of the smartest people I know, one of the greatest technologists and business guys I know, but just didn't have the knowledge on it. And I was like, no, like this is not a way to do it. So the first thing I think is we need a less leveraged system, and we need less leverage in retail, and being able to make sure that, ordinary people or people who, have created value in the economy, who have saved, aren't put in these positions where they're particularly in a fragile spot is imperative number one. I think imperative number two, and this is kind of the thing, is as human beings, we want to do what the people around us are doing, and so there's this tendency to crowd into whatever the safe place to be is, and for a very long time, because of these last 40 years of interest rates coming down, you just own a stock index and a bond index, and so everyone has become more and more long the same two asset classes. And if you look at markets and you kind of like model them deeply, the thing you'll find is the most dangerous place to be in markets is where everyone is when realities shift and there's a stampede out. And I think, and I really hope, imperative number two is that everyone kind of have their own bespoke investment view or investment philosophy on markets or place in the market. Otherwise, you're always going to be susceptible to these kinds of shocks, and the world is only going to grow more volatile over time. And I think principle number three is diversification. I think we've again lived in a world where, because of interest rates, American equities have done disproportionately well, and you can kind of just be long the market. But I think the ability to kind of build deep, bespoke, custom strategies across global markets, across global asset classes, so that you have a strong degree of diversification across equities, fixed income, real estate, commodities, is going to become just almost table stakes to make sure. And I think bringing that sort of diversification and that sort of depth of specialization to as many people as possible is an imperative if we're going to build a more robust financial system. And so those are kind of my takeaways from this crisis. And it's both a great opportunity and it's a great challenge. And hopefully we prove equal to it.
Well, I'd love to dive into that a little bit more, but since we're coming up on time, we also have a couple of questions from Smita, who's joining us from India, and it's like 2:30 in the morning over there. So I want to answer her questions before we continue on. So Smita, thanks for asking these questions. So her first question, actually all three of her questions that came in are for Dani. So Dani, how do you make money? That's one. How long is your enterprise sales cycle for your innovation partners and other clients? Two, and then I'll show the third question after you go through these two.
Yeah. All right. So first question, how do we make money? We're a subscription service. So we charge just a monthly fee per individual on the consumer side or per employee per month on the employer side. And there are a couple of different tiers that employers can pick from. Just like it's kind of, we'll create the custom solution and they'll choose from, 4 plans from us that we have. Enterprise sales cycle for innovation partners and other clients, completely dependent on how big the organization is. So, and it's a standard enterprise sale. So like for some of our smaller clients, like from first touch to close, it can be 60 days. There are a lot of times when, we talk, they get it. And then on the large enterprise side, that could be a lot of times, because we are a younger company, that could be like a pilot at first with a smaller group, and then we'll roll out much more broadly after that and expand gradually. And that whole process, can take, it's taken, initially it took over a year for the first couple, just to get from pilot to rolling out more so. And then one of our big goals on the business development side is just shrinking that. And in a perfect world, everything would be not realistic. Everything would be 60 days. But again, just generally think like the more decision makers involved, the longer that sales cycle is going to be. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And her next question, number 3, how is the employee adoption of your services after the enterprise signs you up?
Oh, we're very good at that. So when we go into an organization, they kind of tell us where the bar is, and we've always delivered at least double the participation that they, asked us to do. So I think a lot of times with finance, the bar is just so low. If they have anything at all, it's like their 401k provider coming in, and like it's not an inspiring session at all. And we've also already talked about earlier that most employees don't care that much about retirement, especially with younger audiences. So when we go in, it's like very refreshing. It looks and feels very different than anything they've seen financial from their employer. So we're able to, I think being different is really what's helped us to and knowing our end user, going back to what Pravin and I were talking about before with really learning and listening. When we go into an organization and we're giving the exact message that employees need to hear to want to change their behavior and to be inspired, it gets them to sign up in a way that in a way that typically you don't see with financial benefits.
Cool. All right. We've got one more question from Smita for Dharti. Dharti, glad to know all of Thai New York's initiatives. Sounds exciting. Is it open only for folks in the US, or can I join from India? Say Thai women, mentor, mentee, funding, support, etc.
Sure. For Thai women, yes. For chapter level, usually it's a good idea to sign up with a local chapter closest to you. I don't know where exactly in India.
Thai Delhi.
Sorry?
Thai Delhi. Smita's from Delhi.
So there is a chapter in Delhi. Yes, there is a Thai Delhi. She could definitely join that. For Thai women, which is a global initiative, she could, definitely join from anywhere. women.thai.org is the place to go for more information. Chapter level, because there are the events that you wouldn't want to miss. But for women, if she's looking to apply for the pitch competition, for example, she can apply from Delhi or from wherever she is, for sure, from women.thai.org.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're right on time. It's exactly an hour since we kicked this off. I want to thank all of you for doing this. I hope it was something that went as smooth as we were all hoping it would. Pravin, thank you so much for joining us. Dani, also, thank you very much. Dharti, thank you so much for the support and getting this off the ground and being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pankaj, for doing this, and we look forward to more in the series. Thank you, Dani. Thank you, Pravin, and look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
And before we go, one quick thing.
Yes.
If anyone wants to get in touch with you, Pravin, Dani, and Dharti, would you recommend a particular way of them getting in touch with you? Either Twitter, LinkedIn, email,
For me, LinkedIn works
carrier
great.
pigeons?
Happy to connect on LinkedIn.
Okay. So for Dharti, anybody who wants to connect with her, please check her out on LinkedIn. Dani?
LinkedIn is perfect, yeah.
And Pravin?
No difference, LinkedIn.
Okay. For me, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm on Twitter.
Thanks, guys.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you so much. So it's going to be this weird little 10-second break over here where I'm ending the broadcast. So everyone can just sit there with a smile on their faces.
Sure. Happy to.